I mean,
Okay, I just started.
thank you for letting us know this.
Well, thank you for talking about this, because I really want to hear it from the beginning. And I that's why, because you sent me an email and you were talking about these amazing things happening in the garden. And it just, I don't know when it started, but there were things missing, things arriving. Um, but it goes back before that. So,
Well,
okay.
it goes back to my birth, actually. I mean, I have always had very dramatic synchronicities, and they get better and better and bigger, you know, and cover years and continents and everything. I've had extraordinary stories, synchronistic stories, but this isn't specifically that. This is what I would call magic happening. Like, for example, this calendula flower that appeared right at the base of a sculpture that a friend made for me years ago. And it's a sculpture of the jaguar shaman. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. And I have that sitting right at the door. And it's on a patch of, I don't know, pebbles and clay. And suddenly appeared the green leaves of a plant. I had no idea what it was. I certainly didn't plant it. And it bloomed less than a week ago. And I think it's a calendula. So it's a, you know, sort of daisy-like, many-petaled yellow petals with a rich brown interior. It bloomed, I think, like 4 days ago, maybe 5 days ago. And the bloom has never faded, or has not faded yet. I have never seen a calendula that hung around this long. And it's a single flower. It's directly beneath the jaguar shaman, right outside my front door. And I have no idea how it got there. Or, I mean, I do hear what it's saying, which is look for magic, basically. Don't be so surprised when magic happens, is what I am hearing from it. So, meanwhile, simultaneously, I had a new pitchfork that I had bought because I wanted to do some pretty heavy digging to create a succulent garden. And I was waiting for the right day to do it. And then when the right day came, I went to grab my pitchfork, and there was no pitchfork there. There was just no pitchfork. I looked all over. I asked everybody if they had seen a pitchfork, if they had borrowed a pitchfork. I live in a community, so that's the sort of backstory. And nobody had seen a pitchfork, but they were all willing to, you know, lend me theirs. No, I bought a pitchfork. I'm sure it's there. It's not, and it still has not been. So, so the backstory is the one in which it goes back to when I was a student in France. And I fell in love with a sculpture. And it was from an 11th century church in Moissac, in the center of France somewhere. And it was they didn't know who it was of. They guessed that it was one of the prophets. Um, Isaiah or Jeremiah was what the scholars said. So I went and read the prophets in the Bible, Isaiah and Jeremiah, and they're all very angry guys. I mean, they're really pissed, and they curse everything and everybody. And this is a portrait. The sculpture is a portrait of a dancing figure with the most beautiful, soulful face I have ever seen anywhere, and certainly not seen in medieval art, especially in the Romanesque period, which was this period that I studied. So there's this beautiful man, and he hung on my wall when I was a student in France, and then he came home with me and has been on my wall wherever I have lived ever since. And I look at him every single day. And one day, many years ago, he disappeared, just disappeared. And I had no idea what had happened. I looked everywhere for him, and he just had disappeared. Well, it was a huge kind of mystery, but I had a bunch of kids and I was, I was not focused on the art on the wall so much or on medieval art history. And I finally just acknowledged he'd gone. Maybe somebody took him. I don't know. I don't know why anybody would take a picture of a Romanesque sculpture off my wall. And then years later, he reappeared.
In the
Suddenly
same,
he was
it was in
there,
the same
not
place?
on the wall,
Okay.
but kind of, on the floor, leaning against a wall that I had passed thousands of times.
So there's no way it had been there the whole time.
There's no way, unless I had been blind or blinded or something, that I would have missed it.
Right.
I mean, I have no explanation whatsoever, but there he was.
How much later was this? Months, years? Or
It was years.
years later?
I mean, not many years, but it was years.
Still.
I would say maybe 4 years, something like that. So there he was, my beloved. And I put him back on the wall and look at him, so grateful and mystified by what has happened. And then one day I had him, well, actually, this happened fairly recently, since Herb died. He was on the wall of our bedroom. And when I woke up and sat up, he was what I saw first thing every morning. And I woke up that morning, and what I realized suddenly was, oh my God, this is not a prophet. This is Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And so I started doing research about the real Jesus as opposed to the church Jesus. And I realized that's my teacher. I recognized him. I mean, he was why I went to France in the first place, because I saw him in an art history class. And I thought, I have to go to see this. And that's what got me into medieval studies.
Where is the original sculpture located now? It's in France?
It's Moissac, which is used to be a pilgrimage church, and it's kind of in the Toulouse area, but it's in a very small town. Not a place that you would normally go to
off the beaten track, for sure.
Very off the beaten track. I think now it's famous, and I think it's famous for him, for that sculpture. But I haven't been back there. So it's a great mysterious story, and he is my guide and has been now since I was 20.
So this flower showing up over Easter week seems especially meaningful.
That's right. I didn't even make that connection. Of course.
And it's just so...
And that's when the pitchfork disappeared.
And these are symbolic things. A pitchfork, of course, is meant for gardening. And if you think of it that way, it's fine. But it's interesting that was the symbolic element that vanished. They joke about pitchforks and torches if you're storming the castle, and the villagers are angry. So if there's an uprising or anger, then the pitchfork might be associated with that. Obviously, it's more a gardening implement.
It's right. I know. I think it occurred to me yesterday, actually, that, oh my God, the devil with the pitchfork. And what I was studying when I was in France was, I didn't expect I was talking about all of this, but it's extraordinary. And I think that you are one person who would appreciate the detail.
I love this. I appreciate it. Yes.
So crazy. So let's see. What was significant about, oh yes. So what I was studying when I was at this Institute of Medieval Studies in this tiny little town in the middle of France was the Last Judgment scenes. Because I wanted to understand the nature of fear in religion. Because all of these, the story of devils and evil, and if you're bad, if you're a sinner, then they can put you in pots of boiling oil, and make you suffer and all of that. It's like, what is that all about? So that's what I was studying. I was studying the nature of fear and the psychology of religion through the Last Judgment scenes.
It's really getting into the shadow side of things. And it's so unusual to approach religion and spirituality from that vantage point. So
That's right.
I had no idea that you did this. When I think of you, this is not what comes to mind for me. When I think Carolyn North, I'm thinking your beautiful stories and your poetry, and you're just poetic and soul. You're just so beautiful on the inside out. You radiate this extraordinary wisdom, this deep honesty and generous. You just have generosity of spirit. So it's so surprising that this would have been your focus. I would never have guessed that.
Well, I think I was on the same path that I continue to be on, is like understanding evil. Like, who says, my question was, who decides who's a sinner? Who gets to make that decision?
Well, I would think God would, right? I mean, properly.
Well, God,
Ideally,
God, who does
optimally.
he choose? Who does he choose? Like the pastor, the padres in the local church. I wouldn't choose them.
You've met some of them, right?
I've met a lot because I was a medievalist for a while. So I was into church stuff, and I'm a Jew. So it's not as if I grew up with any of this stuff.
That's also fascinating. I didn't know this fascination you had, or the story about this picture of the statue of Jesus, what turns out to be Jesus. This whole thing is revelatory.
Turns out to be Jesus.
Wow.
And so my whole understanding, well, I mean, I'm not understanding a thing, is the truth, but there are so many new questions. I mean, so many questions I've been asking all of these years. And now there's a somewhat different focus. It's a deeper focus. So I'm wondering what went wrong and when. When did this all start? Who defined this? Who got away with defining this? Who got away with defining the earth as for sale, for example? When did that start? Private property, and how does that connect up with church politics, with religion, with the spirit? Like, how does this all fit together? And why are we all so scared? So,
well, that was, okay, let's go back to that. The fear. What did you learn about the fear? I mean, why we are so scared? Obviously, we feel separated from source. When we've lost that, then of course we fall into drama. We get angry, we feel sadness and grief. Of course we get frightened. But if you remember, and if you have that faith and feeling, it's really a feeling that comes over us. I believe it's one we can choose through our spiritual path, and we can call for it and experience it deeply if we call for it. But what did you learn about fear? Because I'm fascinated.
Well, the reason I think that I was so fascinated by fear was because I was terrified. And, I came by it honestly in a family of refugees who were very dysfunctional and very dangerous. My father was dangerous to me, and my mother was too. But these poor people, they went through the mill by having to escape for being who they were.
Yes.
So it's a long drama that is shared by many people.
Yes.
Many refugees from anywhere. Who don't belong anywhere, are hated because of who they are, or what religion they are, or what they represent. And so I was brought up in that world. So that's where my fear came from, I believe.
Right.
But I was born a very spiritual little soul.
Yeah.
And so, and I wanted to believe. But the Judaism that I was brought up in was like, I didn't quite trust it at all.
Yes.
It's like, wait a minute. No, that doesn't sound right to me. And so then I became fascinated by Christianity, and that whole period when I was studying medieval art was part of that. It's like, okay, so we don't have a handle on it. And people hate us for this whole chosen people nonsense. So, okay, I'm going to go over into the church and see what's going on there. And I got to France through this particular picture that disappeared from my wall for many years. And then, so it's, it's a lot of magical stuff in this history. And then I tried Buddhism, of course, like everybody else. I went and I went, I love being in a silent room with a lot of people, but nah, this doesn't cover it for me. And what I finally not finally, but the next stage was the Black church. So I joined a Black church and I sang in the gospel choir. And that was where I found something that was real, that felt like, yeah, this is it. But after I was there for 8 years and finally said, but Carolyn, you're not Black, you're not Christian, you're Jewish. What are you doing here? But you understand how the singing and the being together in congregation really brings that experience of spirit. So how do you translate it into a mode that you can teach to white people? And that's how I became a dancer and a singer. I mean, that's what I've been teaching, is basically spirit through dancing and singing.
Love it.
So, and now I'm an old woman. I'm not teaching dance anymore, but I'm still on that same track. That is what my whole life has been about. And if you meet me at a certain point, you'll think I was, oh, she's the lady who sings gospel, or oh, she's the woman who dances. But I'm all of it, and it's really what I'm learning through all of that fascinates me, and it's trying to understand the nature of reality. I mean, I'm doing what we're all doing, is trying to understand what this world is and who we as humans are.
I'm fascinated by this message you got recently to set down the pitchfork and respect this flower that just doesn't stop. It doesn't fade. It's just still there. So your pitchfork is gone. That sort of symbol of the right hand of Satan or whatever. I don't know what to symbol. Like, what is that?
I have no idea.
But when you think of it that way, isn't this amazing? So it's like it's basically saying, maybe don't fixate on what's wrong. Maybe that's part of where humanity chases its tail, is trying to see who did what to whom. And it's a never-ending cycle. The drama doesn't end. There's no end of that chaos. What if we just focus on what is good?
Right.
And we know what that is. It's our love for our friends, our family, our loved ones.
Right. The simple stuff.
Maybe. That's just me. If this was my experience, that's what I'd be thinking. Like, okay, this is super cool,
Yeah, well, I was. And in fact, my plan was that after our call, I would go buy another pitchfork. It's like, okay.
But bless the pitchfork, and maybe put like a picture, the poster of your.
Okay, if you want to come back, you can come back, but I'm going to keep digging.
But this you can sanctify the pitchfork. This is a sacred pitchfork. This has nothing to do with anything about blaming anyone or
Yep. I mean, fortunately, I can afford a second pitchfork, and I will go and buy a second pitchfork and shrug and say, okay, other pitchfork, I know you're invisible and you are going to show up one of these days, but right now I have to create this bed to plant in, so I'm going to go get another pitchfork.
Right.
And then, but I agree with you that it's what I think both of us are trying to understand is the nature of the larger context in which we live, because that is what that's the model, that, and it's much bigger than right here, right now.
Right.
But it is the pattern within which we live. So how do we live in the largest, most beautiful, I mean, the way you put it is how good can it get, right?
Yes.
It's the same thing. Like, and I'm sort of asking, how big can it get? Or how complex can it get? Or how many dimensions are there really? Or who else is really here with me? Does anybody else see what I see?
Yeah.
kind of question.
I had a cool experience on that the other day. I was doing some sort of research into the community where I live. Originally, there were 4 houses here because I'm not traveling much geographically through space. I'm doing some time travel. Let's go back 100 years. Let's see, what did this look like where I live 100 years ago? And in the process of doing that, I was getting excited to meet a family from 100 years ago, because I'm just looking through genealogical records of this old 100-year-old area. And there's just a few households. Basically, these were professors that built in this area in Berkeley where I live. And so there were just a few of them, like 4. There were 4 houses here originally. So I was studying one of them, and my husband commented like, well, maybe they don't like you looking into this. I'm like, well, I don't think that's the case, but you know, I would like to respect them. Right? Love your spirit. We're having fun here. I'm time traveling. Anyway, it gets better because I went on a walk after we'd had this conversation. So the very next walk I take, I always have my camera with me. And at one point on my walk, it was a very clear nudge, take a picture now. And I'm like, why, what, you know, what? And like that house, like that one, that does look like, that's probably one of the old houses. Yes, take it now. And like now, I'm still a bit pushing, you know, is it fast? I'm dragging this conversation out. It was happening like that, you know. And I thought, okay. So I'll take a picture. I took a picture, did the rest of the walk, no other pictures, came home, and then I continued the research I was doing. I found a picture of 4 little children exactly from the vantage point of the photo I took, these 4 little children. And then that to me was saying like, it's okay. We're glad you're honoring our family. This is very special to honor a family of the past who built a house here.
Yeah.
So I think, and I think these kind of, this magic, these connections, this who is here, what are the dimensions, it's much bigger than than the physical reality. You know, what's just in front of our hands, that's very limited. But
well, that's the 3-dimensional world. And the big mistake that's, I think, is being made in the world is to assume that that's it. You know, the scientists start with 3 dimensions. Well, you know, for goodness sakes.
Oh, we know it's so much more than that. And that's, you know, when people are talking about simulation theory, like it's something new. Oh my gosh. to me, it's like, this is the dream. We're living within a waking dream. And that's been taught, like you studied Buddhism. It's right there. It's the, you know, it's like the lotus dream, dreaming this entire reality. And all the indigenous peoples of the world have dream mythologies. The Australians have the dream time. You know, it's very, very clear. Of course, John Perkins, The World is As You Dream It, talking with the Shuar in the rainforest and the jungles in Ecuador, basically showing, you know, this is a dream. Now that makes sense to me, that this is a waking dream. In a waking dream, a flower can bloom and stay fresh for 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, a flower that just came by itself.
Out of nowhere, never, and you would know if there's nothing like it on the property. That was what I meant to ask. No other seeds that could have come from.
Well, you know, birds could have pooped in that particular place, having eaten a seed from, I mean, calendulas are almost a wildflower. So they're all over the place. So it's not surprising that that a seed would get into the ground one way or another, but the placement and the timing was
Easter.
kind of miraculous. Well, I think what you're describing and calling dream time, I would call intuition. It's just a way of knowing the world through a different, it's not even a modality. It's like not through here. I mean, that's one way of knowing the world. And the mistake has been that's the only way of knowing the world. And it's not.
So well, I think we've only made that mistake though, like in the West, the last 400 to 600 years. Before,
absolutely.
Prior to that, we had some awesome mystics, Christian mystics, even, you know, from all walks, and they were advocating and recommending, like, you can. I don't think they call it lucid dreaming or lucid living, but that's what I would call it now. I would say this is how you can acknowledge that, you know, when you feel in your heart these feelings of connection, that what you call miracles or magic can occur through intuition. These are all, this is a family of ideas: imagination, the imaginal realm,
And healing.
Yes, healing is very much a part of that. And it fits within the quantum idea, this paradigm that we live in a participatory universe, that it's very retrocausal. In other words, we totally can affect the past. To me, that's healing, because you've got that connection. What if you didn't have such a bad injury? What if what seems to be the case, again, what's in front of your senses, what if that's not quite the ultimate reality? Now we know that's true. You and I know that.
Mm.
And that's what I'm hoping to share with this conversation.
Well, yeah, let's do it. And in the past, we would be burned at the stake.
Hopefully
I mean,
not everywhere, hopefully. Not everywhere.
not everywhere, but
only in certain communities.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, the church, which is what I'm focused on these days, and I hope nobody listening to this feels personally affronted by my understanding of things, but the church killed people, women who were healers, were midwives, they were called witches, and of course, as you know, witch comes from the word Wicca, which meant wise woman, and that was not okay to the official people who made the rules. That was not okay, and so people were sacrificed for knowing what they weren't supposed to know, for knowing what they were not allowed to know. And that whole history, and the whole history of a patriarchal state in which women were just helpmaidens and were not taken seriously for anything or had any power. All of that is now coming into question in a variety of ways. What hasn't yet kind of surfaced in the general public is the whole issue of the mystical way of knowing that I've seen. That's still, I mean, I was a mystic when I was born,
Yes.
and I have suffered from that in my own family. And still, I have to be quiet about it. Like, I really want to say to I live in this community, I want to say, I want everybody to notice that my pitchfork is gone, but I think it's gone invisible. And everybody keep an eye out. I think it's going to reappear.
Often
I
things
can't
do.
say that out
Yeah.
loud.
Oh my gosh. See, when our family dog got cataracts, and first my husband and then my daughter would come and tell me about this, I would just remind them, I'd say yes. They would say like bad news about the dog. And I said, oh, the cataracts. It looks like he has cataracts. And they'd say yes. And I said, well, you know what to do. We're not going to worry about this. Yes, it looks like he has cataracts sometimes. But what I do when I see that is I just say no. And then his eyes clear up. So that's what we're doing. We're doing that. And then they're like, oh, okay. So
and it worked.
It totally worked. But it was funny that it went through all three of us. Like I saw it and I'm like, oh dear. And like, no. Like, oh, good, cleared up. The visions are back. His eyes are clear and bright. And then it's funny that it went through the whole household that way. So it was interesting.
That's interesting.
It's good for us to know that. I think you're a fantastic teacher. And I think maybe it feels hard for you to do this, with some of the like your family and people close to you physically, but people that read your books are so energized, so inspired, so uplifted. Yes. And the journeys and this travel stories that you tell are the best. And you're one of the world's best storytellers that I've ever met.
Oh, Cynthia, my God. I won't complain about anything ever again.
I'm just telling you the truth.
Well, thank you very, very much. That's very encouraging. And in my experience, I was way ahead of my time. Everything I have ever written was an attempt to tell a very ordinary story, but to tell it from this angle.
Yes.
And to sort of get in subtly what I was trying to say rather than writing about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And if it has indeed reached your soul, I feel like my life has not been lived in vain. So thank you.
Far from it. Yeah. So,
But,
but you're part,
but
you're part of this resurgence of the feminine wisdom, of this awareness that it's okay to carry this, to be that mystic. And I really honor that in your example.
well, thank you. I wish it worked that way in my family. But I am not known that way. And I mean, I was married to a scientist, to a chemist, and two of my children are actually very successful scientists. And my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law and my cousins and they're all scientists. And what I don't know that any of them have really ever read anything I've written or been willing to just talk about it with me. So I'm not part of the academic scientific crowd, which is who I've lived with. But I don't think it's an accident in a way, because living with them and trying to make myself understood. I mean, with Herb, I didn't try that much with the rest of the family, but with my husband, I had to find a way of bridging our language gap.
Yes.
And we were married for 57 years. And for 57 years, we worked at it. And he always would say, well, no, and then tell me, the correct way of thinking. And I would want to cry. But interestingly enough, and I think this is significant, I know it's significant to me, was when he was dying. It was, I don't know, his last 2 days, I guess. His eyes suddenly went wide open and luminous. Yes. And he said, oh, I see, how did he put it? There are thousands and thousands and thousands of worlds. And he described what he was seeing. And then at the end, he said, this is so profound. This is so powerful.
Yes.
And those were his last words. And I wanted to say, hey, wait a minute, you can't die now. We have to talk about this.
To be continued.
Yeah, like, oh God, I have to wait till I get there. But by that time, you'll be my teacher. But that was an extraordinary moment when he recognized, I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he recognized what I had been trying to say for half a century.
Sounds like it to me, yes.
Yeah.
And I like that focus where it's just recognizing all these worlds and the wonder of it all.
The wonder, that's right. The look in his eyes,
yes,
I had never seen before.
Yes.
And it was like oh.
Yes. Well, I saw a luminosity in our family dog, the same one with the cataracts, when he got toward the end of his days. He was just beaming. His health was failing. He was having micro strokes, and obviously, old age, it hits dogs like it hits people. And but he just started smiling, and dogs are happy, but he became radiantly happy. Oh. And every day I would always tell him, I love you forever. I love you always. And in that last month, he would look at me like, you mean it? Like, yeah, you silly fool. I've always meant it. He's like, but you mean it? I'm like, yeah. And I was like, wow, he's in a different place now. It's like he's really in a different place. It was amazing. So I know I saw that luminosity, and I was like, wow. And he wasn't afraid to die. I think that's part of what happens. There's something just from I've only had a few experiences with people close to death, but it does seem like something opens, and the awareness of this ultimate reality presents itself, the thinning of the veils happens. So we see it really happens beyond this physical illusion. This is illusion. This is like a waking dream. It's a simulation is what they call it now. That's the in term. It's new. It's not new. This is not new. Simulation is not new. What we've known for a long time, that this world is like Maya. It's illusion. There are all these different words for it. But it isn't only illusion. I mean, it depends on your perspective. And right now,
it is very solid. And you and I are talking through this crazy technology thing, but God bless it, even though it's nuts. And right now, and we're going to get hungry and we're going to have to eat supper, and that's not illusion. I mean, you can call it that, but it's real life.
My favorite word is lucid living. That's my favorite. Lucid
Yeah.
living. And I like Rev humanism. Those are my terms.
Yeah.
It's me rocking my terms. I'm just mentioning simulation because Elon Musk talks about simulation theory and everyone's like, woo, it's new. That's not new. That's not new. That's not new. The Buddhists talk about Maya. That's not my favorite word. I don't like simulation. Maya is not my thing. Intuition to me is interesting and that's good. And it's like part of what we're given by source, and it's a part of how we operate. To me, that perennial philosophy is very real, that all of these paths to the zero entropy point converge. So you can talk to an atheist or a scientist and tell them, I can imagine zero entropy, Mr. Scientist or Ms. Scientist. And they'll say, what do you mean? I'll say, well, it's where there is no change, where it's infinite and it's eternity. And it's that essence of everything. So you can read Carlo Rovelli's book about time and recognize everything else has entropy, everything else. Time goes at different rates for me than it does for you. It's different for my head than my toes. If I go to a different elevation, time is different, blah, blah, blah. So there's so much variability, but the key is we all come together. All the religions point toward that same perennial point that was, Leibniz is one of my favorite scientists. He created science, the Western version of the pillars of science that we love so much, but he understood levels of consciousness and this point that where it can come together. That's so important.
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that we make is that we think in either or terms. If it's this, it can't be that. And I think, reality, whatever reality is all of it. And we all have a different, the hardware in our brains is different for everybody. We all have a different ability to get in there and perceive. And so, we get into all these wars over, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, which are just stupid because everybody's right. And what's wrong is when you kill each other for it, or let children starve, or do the harmful things that we have done through historic time to one another, which are totally unnecessary. Like, whose idea was that?
Yeah. Sometimes some of it's done inadvertently, like we think we're clever, but we end up inadvertently causing damage too. So, and then people get upset about that, and further infighting in politics and strife occurs based on that. It's all rather unfortunate. So I agree with you.
So, and there's also a lot in jealousy and competition,
right?
Especially amongst women. Well, maybe not especially.
Well, no, it's true. I think that does happen. Yeah.
It does, but it's like, I'm going to hold on to this because it's my perception, but secretly I really wish I was as pretty as you are and as smart as you are, and like, we all do it. It's just I do it, certainly. And living in community now for the first time, boy, it's like kindergarten.
Right.
In terms of, just emotional maturity. Like,
But I want to go full circle back to when you first wanted to study about fear. This is so interesting. Like, you're studying the shadow stuff. What did you come up with then, and what are you thinking now? You've had so many life experiences between when you first got into the study of spirituality, religion, all of that, looking at, why are people doing these things? And now with decades further experience, what are your insights now, and how has that changed?
Good question. I'm not sure I know. But I do know, thinking back, is I've always been doing this. I didn't call it this. I didn't know it, that I was doing it, but I was always watching, well, I had to because my safety was at stake in the family, but also very curious about you know, these crazy aunts and uncles that I had, all of whom had suffered greatly, and they fought constantly, um, and they were really ignorant. I mean, they were unschooled for the most part. They were refugees, and it was the time of the World War II, and the Depression had recently been, so people were desperate. And so, to answer your question, I was watching. I was one of those kids who watched it all. I was very quiet, and I kind of, you know, I blended into the wallpaper, but I watched. So I think that's my main answer, is that I watched. And as I've grown older, I've had the opportunity to very consciously watch, realizing that this watching was my study, that that's what I was here for, was to watch, to understand, and to come to some kind of conclusion about the nature of reality, so that I could try and save us all, because we were clearly just doing each other in, and that was considered okay. And then when I got old enough and tried to become a good Jew, oh my life, and that was during the Second World War, during Hitler time, I was trying to become a good Jew, and and you couldn't understand what the hell was going on. You know, why are the adults so crazy? And who's doing this to whom? And do we deserve it? I mean, my family was crazy enough, so I was thinking, well, maybe we deserve it. Who knows? So, well, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I've been just trying to figure it out
Yeah.
for my whole life, and I'm still doing that. I'm just a little more
I
sophisticated
like,
now.
I love the way you sit with it, you embrace it. So it's not, you're not trying to say like, I understand it all. I've narrowed it all down and I've consolidated it and distilled it, and here it is. What I love about you is the way you present it, like it's a gestalt, you know? It's like here to hear you talk about those times, I keep thinking like, wow, it sounds like now, you know, it's like, and then you wonder like, what has really changed in the world? Like, hopefully we're getting better. That's what I hope. I hope we are expanding, you know, the way you talk about like how big can it get?
Yeah. Well, I think what's really up for me now, very recently, and this will sound very different to you, is I'm trying to figure out who I am. And now that I'm learning more about extraterrestrials, and I'm learning about, you know, where we come from
Like
and
star family. Oh yeah. Are you getting into the star family thing? Do you feel like you've got star
oh,
family? Yeah.
maybe that's closer to the truth, is,
Yeah.
you know, is that I'm here to do a certain job, and I'm here maybe not from here,
Right.
or not totally from, I mean, what do I know? And whether it's significant or not, I don't know, but I have a blood type that's very unusual.
Really?
And yeah, and recently I read something that it was a significant blood type, and indicated something about coming from a different planet. Well,
Oh,
what do I know?
is that the RH negative that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So all I knew up until very recently was that it was dangerous for a fetus, and that's why I even knew what my blood
Well,
type was.
that's because they used to have blue babies. Yeah, that's how I knew my blood type too. RH negative also.
Oh, you are. See,
Yes.
that
Yes.
is not surprising,
Okay.
because, and we are similar in terms of
Yes.
what is interesting to us, and
Yes.
what we study, and how, what the questions we ask. I don't think that that's just chance.
Right. Well, you could be right about that. And
Mm,
you had that interesting experience that you wrote in to Reality Shifters about. I don't know if you want to talk about that too.
go ahead.
Well, you were wondering, one thing that happens when we experience reality shifts, I think some people often wonder, am I imagining this? Or like, is there, like, did that just happen? Like, is this my mind playing tricks on me? Is this something I should get used to as I get older? You know, but then what I would say is use Occam's razor. And if you have an experience where you feel like, I'm not sure what's going on here, And if you're not getting those on a regular basis, then I don't think it's your mind playing tricks on you. In that case, I would say probably you've experienced a reality shift. And these things really do happen because there is a base reality that's realer than the physical senses that we sense. It creates them. The realer reality creates the things that we feel.
Well, and what about synchronicities? So
That too,
same
also,
thing?
yeah, same thing.
Yeah. Okay, now how do you understand people who have a real penchant for synchronicities? For whom, I mean, I'm one of them. They happen every single day. And some of them are greatly dramatic and, oh, I mentioned it already, take place over continents and time. And I can tell you some of those stories. They're really great, I must say. But how do you understand that ability, like that personality trait?
Well, to me, it seems like it's often associated. I did a study on this, which I don't know if you followed it, but I looked into the Myers-Briggs personality types, ran a survey with hundreds of people, and it turned out that the intuitive feelers on the Myers-Briggs interest inventory psychological test, it just takes a minute or a few minutes to take the test online for free. And the result would be either you're introvert or extrovert. So it's I'm an INFJ. That's introverted, and then N, intuitive, F, feeler, J, judging. So that's INFJ, and it's only like 3% of the population.
No kidding.
Yeah, no kidding. But if you take that apart and look just at the center part, the intuitive feeler, the NF. So that means you got extroverts and introverts. You got judgers and perceivers. But the big key thing, your intuitive feelers. Those are the people that's still a minority of the overall population. If you take all the intuitive feelers in the room, if everyone takes the test and raise your hand if you're an intuitive feeler, okay, that's going to be just like a quarter of the room. So that 25% of the room, and then you ask this, the next question, keep them where they are. So you got your small group of intuitive feelers, huge group of those who aren't. So it's 25, 75, like 1/4, 3/4. And then you ask the next question. Okay, raise your hand if you've experienced a reality shift, coincidence, synchronicity, Mandela effect, anything, or UFOs even, anything like that. Boom. Guess what happens next? 75% of the cases are the small group of your intuitive feelers. They're the ones that have the synchronicities off the hook. They're the ones that see the UFOs in the sky. They're the ones that experience the Mandela effect and the reality shifts. Yeah.
And they're also the people who, in a crowd, I can point them out in 2 seconds, and that's who I end up talking to.
Yes. I had a woman on a bicycle. I was walking along the woods right near Tilden Park, and this woman, I've never met her. I don't know her. She's on a bicycle headed toward me. She slows to a stop. Her eyes get huge. She's recognizing me. And she's, like one, what you call wise woman, Wicca to another. And she says, have you seen any amazing animals today? And I'm thinking, yeah. And so we just started a long conversation. It ends up where I'm describing some of the wackiest, most wonderful stuff about my squirrel bringing me apples in my chair. Mm-hmm. And I'd never seen this before. And she says, don't you love how they always bring you the best apples? And I'm like, she knows. Like, yeah. And I'm like, what are the odds of this happening? But it's what you're saying. It's like you can recognize each other.
You can feel it.
Yeah, you can feel it.
Yeah, and you'll be friends forever, right?
Well, that was such a spontaneous, bizarre moment. I am friends with her, but I didn't find out where does she live. It doesn't seem like that's the key. To me, it's just another indicator that there's this vast network of flowers popping up under shrines everywhere, showing us that magic is real. The intuitive is real. We are creating this new world. Never mind what it looks like and what you saw in the news today, or what we've personally experienced and what's happening. That's all physical stuff, but it's not really the ultimate reality.
But indeed, that's our job.
That's what you and I are doing, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation today.
Yeah, me too. But that's what we're here for.
Yes.
And I've been slapped around for it, but I can ignore that now.
Good.
And know that I have only so much time left, and I've got to do it to my best ability every day.
I'd like to see you honored and revered and respected for what you've done and what you're continuing to do and who you are as a person, because you're such a great role model to all of us. And women today need this kind of example, and we don't see it typically we don't see it in politics. We don't see it in celebrities usually. You know, it's just a rare thing. So I want to thank you.
Well, it's also rare, I think, because we would be really unhappy in politics. You
Oh
know,
yeah, no, we wouldn't. We don't go there. No.
so that's.
I know. That goes without saying, right? That's not where they're going to find us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I used to say when I was a very unhappy young girl, every dog has his day, was my saying for myself. Like, it's going to be awful for a while, but one of these days, who you are is going to be honored. You know, you're going to be able to use this. So thank you. I think it started today with you.
Yes.
Thank
Good.
you.
Oh my gosh. Well, in my opinion, it started a long time ago for you. You're like, woo. Just
Well, I've gotten into trouble for it, and you know, and it's interesting because there are people now, those of my generation who are still alive. A lot of us are gone by this time, but people who fell in love with me, boys,
yes.
and I, you know, I wasn't particularly pretty. I didn't think. Certainly, I didn't have the, you know, the sachet. I didn't have any of it. But there were these boys. I've been thinking about it a lot just recently, who just couldn't get enough of me, who wanted to marry me, who wanted to follow me, who adored me.
Yes.
And it's like, what's your problem?
I can see that totally. It's your heart. It's like how we recognize each other. They
Well,
clearly felt that in you.
I have finally figured out with a couple of them is they felt safe with me.
Yes.
It was like, you know, I was kind of a mom.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean. In fact, it's funny you mentioned that. When I traveled to Europe with my daughters, both on the way to, we had a stopover in New Jersey or something before we got on our flight to France. And in the airport there, a young man, just barely over the age of 18, asked permission, may I join you? And it was just me and my two daughters. And I said, of course.
Babies at the time.
Yeah, but he felt like it was a safe family, and it was sort of that it created, and then he felt, I thought, sure, join us. So now it's like I had the two young girls, teenagers, and the young man. It's just, it seemed perfect. And, but the same thing, the exact same thing happened on the return trip with a different young man. And that was beyond coincidence. That's like, okay, now I'm paying attention. What is going on here? And I came to a similar conclusion. They felt safe. They felt like, okay, and in both cases, I think they missed their families. They were traveling alone, both cases leaving, and it was a big journey. And they just wanted to be, you know, in that safe feeling like, there's someone looking after me, keeping an eye on the whole thing so I can relax, you know, and just.
But it also might have been a protective impulse on their parts.
I think both. Yeah, I think you're right. A little bit.
I'm going to stand there.
Yeah.
Take care of them.
Yeah. But these were clearly, it was more the mom thing. And I've often had, I've taught classes with young children, and children that I've just met or barely know. They just love to call me mom and hug me. And I've never seen that. It's not like a common, I don't see that happen to other people. I mean, I would ask, like, does this happen to you? I don't think it does. Where they just like mom, you know, and they just like throw their arms around my legs because they're small, you know, these are little people. And I'm like, this is adorable.
Well, I could see doing that.
Yeah.
I'd like to.
But I think with young men, they're feeling all of that for you and more. They're feeling the intuitive feeler heart, like they trust you in every level of their being. And that's a rare thing with women. I think most women often, like most men, might be playing games and, you know, engaging in drama. I don't think you engage in drama like that. So
not like that, but in my own sort, I do.
Well, we don't need to delve into that.
The drama we've gotten into.
Well, it's human nature, but I don't think you're a drama queen. You don't strike me that way.
No, but I'm uncautious often and get into horrible trouble. But the horrible trouble, more often than not, is the greatest adventure of my life. You know, like when I almost died on the volcano in Galapagos Islands.
Now you got to talk about that because you can't just bring that up. That's what?
That was really, I mean, I'm lucky to be alive. I was on the Galapagos, long story how I got there, but I was with a scientific expedition. And I wanted time alone on an island. I wanted to basically do, what do they call it when you go off on your own? You have a
Sabbatical, retreat, or sabbatical, or,
it,
just a,
it's a, a solo,
yeah,
a solo
right.
testing time.
Okay.
Anyhow, I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it on an uninhabited island. And in the Galapagos, there are all of these. I mean,
Yes.
how I got to the Galapagos in the first place is a whole other story. But I was with an expedition. I wanted to be without the expedition and just be on one of the active volcanoes by myself for a week. And got very reluctant permission from the head of the institute there on one of the islands. But I had to make many promises about how I would only stay on the coast and I would not go onto the lava. I would not try and climb the volcano, et cetera, et cetera. And the short story of the long story is that I disobeyed. And at a certain point, I had to walk to that volcano because it was so close, right? It wasn't so close. And I got caught out in the lava field because I had seen an anomaly. It's all black lava, and there was something red that I saw in the distance. I had to check it out. I mean, of course, like, what is this anomaly? And I finally got to it, and it was a bomb. It was a rusted bomb.
Oh my gosh.
But I didn't know it at the time, but I learned later that that island had been used for bombing practice.
Right.
And this was a huge, like, you can't see this,
Yeah.
a big bomb.
Oh no.
And I fainted. I mean, it's like I had a shock reaction.
Right.
And I was dehydrated because I didn't have enough water, and I still had to get back to the coast.
Oh gosh.
And I crumpled. And what is the point of this? Oh, yeah. And I thought, okay, I'm never going to get up. I can't. I'm going to die here. And all those warnings were real, even though I didn't take it seriously. But this is the end of my life. Forgive me, God. Forgive me, family. I'm never going to come home, blah, blah, blah. And what happened, why I'm here to tell the tale, is that a voice inside my head started saying, get up, get up, get up, get up, until finally I dragged myself to my feet and started walking toward the coast. And the voice never stopped through the whole, and there were pressure ridges, so I was going down and up. I mean, it was a nightmare. And every time I would give up, which was frequently, the voice would say, no, get to the coast, get to the coast. You're on your way, keep going.
Wow.
Until I, in fact, got there.
Wow.
And that's why I'm alive now. So what was that voice? Who was that voice? Who was watching me? Why was I so crazy as to do that in the first place? What was I testing? And I realized, after the fact, I was probably testing death. I was going as close as I could because I wanted to know, and this was not conscious by any means,
Right.
but I wanted to know something. And I survived because I listened to the voice.
Yes.
And then drank the whole water jerry can pretty much empty. And then I learned it was also the full moon and the tides were very low. I had
yes.
done I was living out there on a cove in the middle of nowhere. Wow. On an island with no people on it. So why was I telling you this? Oh, about crazy things that I have done.
Yes, but then you learn from it. You said you gain something as a gift from the experience. I think that's always true, that every difficult thing can offer us a gift if we
Yeah.
look for it and if we find it. And
Yeah.
maybe we don't understand all the mysteries. Maybe we always end up with more questions than answers,
Right.
but they're exciting. I mean, it shows that there's something much more than what meets the eye, that there is a guidance there.
Right.
And I've heard voices too
Also,
lots of times. Yeah.
there's this lesson about, for this earth, this body, this time,
Yes.
that says, okay, don't ever do that again. You know,
Right.
like, have you learned something about the frailty of your human body? You can't push it that far. And I have never forgotten that. And it was an important one because I am that kind of person who will, leap into thin air. So, again, it's the fear thing that fascinates me so much. And what we can learn from fear, as well as, what we can learn from being afraid. There's a certain self-protective purpose that fear serves.
Yes. I mean, it gives us an opportunity to find, like they say in French, the heart is cour, so we've got courage. That courage is it's the flip side of fear. And courage, and the way you found your courage, it sounds like you heard the voice, you stand, get up, and then you start getting up. And so you found courage in the fear. And I think that's the reason we look for fear, is to find the courage. That's my feeling about it.
Well, to test the world. I mean,
Yeah.
I think those of us who do like to ask these kinds of questions are always kind of pushing the boundaries. Because, I never had this thought before, but because we recognize that the boundaries are false boundaries. That is
Exactly.
much bigger than we thought.
Like you said, how big can it get? That's a quote from Carolyn North. How big can it get?
Well, somebody else.
push the boundaries,
Push the boundaries and feel what it feels like.
I love it.
Learn from it.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm going to stop the recording and see if I can find where it is. Where is it? Oh boy, I'm not used to Skype. Where is it? Man.
Maybe I can stop it.
Maybe it shows
on
me
my
here.
side.